look, we don't know when there's going to be another recession. We know it will happen, right? And you can even argue when a recession now, whatever. But when we go back to 2008, if you remember, we went through this. I remember it clear as day. We went through this cleansing in franchising, if you would. People who should not have been in franchising, who were surviving.
Oh yeah.
They had a mediocre company in 2005, 6, 2007, and they survived because the economy was good, but they had a mediocre business. And then what
Yep.
happens during recession? You have a cleansing because it's survival of the fittest and you can't hide anymore. What are your thoughts now about what it takes? What do people need to take right now in taking action if they have that business where they don't have their T's crossed, their I's dotted when it comes to operations and support, knowing that you don't know when the next recession is going to hit, but it's going to happen. And we saw this together, did we not?
Yeah. And I was fortunate because that was the only world we ever knew. So we started out with that, that world that everyone had to adapt to, but we didn't have to adapt to it.
Right.
That's where we started out. But I think it's really people. So starting out with having the right culture of people. And, I think it's really hard as you're growing fast to let go of people when you need to let go of them. You look at them and go, they're not doing a great job, but they're doing the job. And it's not bad or it's not bad enough to fire them. You start coming up with all the excuses of why. And you're thinking in your head, like, I've got to let them go. And if once I let them go, then who's going to do that work while I'm trying to find someone else? And what if I don't find someone else? And what's going to happen there? And the reality is we've all done this multiple times. No one in the history of employment has ever let someone go and wish they had waited longer. I challenge you to find anyone who says, yeah, I let them go, but I wish I waited a little bit longer to do it. Because all the problems start coming out and you just regret it over and over and over again, probably for the next, at least the next several months, and sometimes years. Things pop up and you realize what it was really costing you, not only in things that weren't working well and process and problems, but in culture. A players hate well, everybody hates C players,
Right.
and those should be the easy ones, but we tend to keep C players around for those reasons. But I think the most dangerous person in an organization is a B player that's never going to be an A player. Because what you're saying to your A players is we don't know the difference between a B player and an A player. And A players want to be recognized as A players, and they don't like hanging out with B players. They're going to stay there at that B level, and they leave. They go somewhere else. So you're going to lose your A players trying to maintain and retain your B players.
That is fantastic observation. I would define, as I was thinking about my history, I define a B player as somebody who is capable and not willing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in the US model, you look at culture. So if you're a culture fit in our company, the seat that you're sitting in, and we just went through a seats exercise. We do it every year to make sure we take everything that needs to be done in the organization, every minute, every hour, every week, month, quarter, year, and we put it on a sticky note. So if changing the soap out in the bathroom, if you don't have someone outsourced to do that, that goes on the list.
Right.
Thankfully, we outsource that. But that goes on the list, and they're all in sticky notes. And we go up on a board, and we're not thinking about names. So we're coming up with seats, and this is the good to great, the right people on the bus.
Yep.
So the bus is the culture, and the right people in the right seats. So we define the seats, and we put them in areas that we know make sense. Because oftentimes we build seats for people like, oh, you're really good at this thing. We'll have you do this. And all of a sudden you have this position that doesn't make any sense. And once you're done with that, then you start going and putting the names on it. And it's a great exercise. It can go right in a very difficult way because I've done it before where, once you start putting names on it, there's someone in the room. It's almost like Duck, Duck, Goose or the musical chairs, and the music stops playing. And I had that happen. I bought a manufacturing company because with ShelfGenie, we wanted to get vertically integrated. So the two owners, the president, the head of operations came. We did the seats exercise for that manufacturing company, and also the person who was the plant manager. So there's three of them in the room, and they're the ones that came up with all these things. We put them on the board. They helped me organize it into all the right places. Here's the head person. Here's operations, sales, marketing, all the positions, and then we started putting names on it, as you do if that's the final thing you do. And I looked at the president of the company, and here's the things you have to do. He goes, I don't want to do all those things. I would like some of them, but I'm not doing all that. And then the head of operations, the other owner, was like, I'm not doing all those things. And even the plant manager was like, I'll do, most of those things, but I'm not doing those two things. And they're the ones that had me come up with the seats. So they all walked out of the room without a job. And
Wow.
yeah, because this is what the organization needs. This is what needs to be done. Now, because they're owners, they help, fill those positions, but they weren't super excited about that because they just wanted a job, but they weren't going to fit in a seat. So once you define those seats, does that person get it? Do they want it and have the capacity? So that goes back to your B players. Sometimes it's want it. Sometimes it's capacity. I don't have the capacity to do most things in my organization because it requires sitting still for more than 3 to 4 minutes. Like I can do that, and I'm struggling right now to sit here, but I'm talking a lot, so that helps. But capacity doesn't mean you're not smart. Doesn't mean you can't do things. It's just for that position, you don't have the capacity to do it. And capacity could also be time if you don't have enough. If that job is really for 2 people, and that's a leader's responsibility to address that.
Yeah, for sure. I would come home. Look, I'm guilty as charged when I was starting out too. And I would come home and probably came home too many times in a row where I told my wife, this person needs to go. I talked to them. And you know what my answer used to be? I would say, we have bigger fish to fry than letting this person go, because I would do exactly what you said. Who is going to do this job? And I'm going to get stuck doing it. So keeping C players around is definitely not the right answer. And one more thing, for folks that are maybe new, that are emerging founders that are listening to you and I talking about this, they need to keep one thing in mind, is that by not letting that person go, you're really holding them back from the place.
There you go.
They're holding them back from the place that they really need to be, where they're going to thrive.
Yeah. And that really is the mindset, because it's absolutely true. I've let a lot of people go over the years. One of the times that happened was, I didn't have a culture in my company when I first started. That's something I learned later on when I got a CEO coach. And he's like, what are your values, your culture? I'm like, I don't know, work hard, get it done. And so we got the team together, came up with the values of the company. But very quickly, when you do that, like if you don't have a culture, it just sucks, because you got a whole bunch of them. So it's basically like high school. Everybody kind of figures out their groups, and this is what our culture is in this group. So, and you always have the bottom 20. So when we put in our culture, the bottom 20 that clearly weren't culture fits, you let them go and you bring in a new team that gets the speech. Here's our culture, here's our values, you're hiring for it. Now all of a sudden it levels up and there's a new bottom 20. So I had 98% intentional turnover over a 2-year period because of that. And when I say intentional, the plan wasn't to go in and do 98% turnover, but the plan was to get everyone to be a culture fit. So the bigger your organization is, the harder it is to change that culture. And it was painful for 2 years. And, someone I really respected that's, in a lot of leadership roles in large companies, who's done this before, he's like, 2 years is not a bad time frame to change the culture in your size company. So now is the time to do it. If you're emerging, start protecting that culture, because that's what's going to happen. But those people we let go, I've monitored, and they all found better places. And it's so much easier to let someone go because they're not a culture fit. Because what you're saying is, this is how we do things here. There's lots of cultures and companies. I had a media marketing manager who, she was terrified of me. I remember walking down the hallway, she was coming down the other way. And I remember she saw me, she very quickly turned around, went the other direction.
Oh no.
And I didn't scream or yet, but she was just intimidated with, the way we grow and fast. I often liken our, if you use a sports analogy, cultures are different, like different sports. So we're a rugby culture. We don't physically hit each other, but we're hard hitting, breaking through walls, like whatever we got to do. It's a different culture than, if you take a basketball player and throw him in a rugby game, it's not going to work out. So she went to IBM. I remember, I still was connected with her on LinkedIn, and she reposted something the CEO of IBM said, and was like, this is great. She would never would have reposted anything I said, because I wasn't her CEO. We weren't, our culture and values were not her culture and values, and that's okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then you have to go where you need to go, where you're a better fit.
It just works out so much better, and it works out better for everybody.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.